Today's leading news stories feature Israeli-Palestinian efforts at trying to jumpstart the stalled peace process. Will it work? Also, we take a look at the Israeli economy and how a 4,000-year-old promise in the Bible has a solution for today's lagging world economy. Finally, we see how an old epidemic of child abuse has now hit Israel and what you can do to make a difference in your neighborhoods in the face of this slaughter of the innocents. Stay tuned for my biblical perspective on the news and prayer points right after the IBA English news.
Good evening and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem. In tonight's lead story, Government Minister Benjamin Ben Eliezer said today that an Iranian attack on Israel will lead to the destruction of the hardline Islamic nation. Ben Eliezer made the comments during the countrywide Homefront drill, which began yesterday. Meanwhile, Syria and Lebanon remain on high alert for fears that the exercise may lead to an Israeli attack. We get details now from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
Top Israeli officials today continued their messages of calm as the national emergency drill entered its second day. Defense Minister Ehud Barak and Deputy Defense Minister Matan Vilnai continued this agenda this afternoon during a tour of some of the sites where the exercise took place. This is the biggest home command drill ever carried out in Israel and the first under the auspices of the newly created National Emergency Administration. During the morning, Infrastructure Minister Benjamin Ben Eliezer, who was visiting his ministry's war room, took the opportunity to warn Tehran that an attack on Israel would lead to fierce retaliation that would result in the destruction of Iran. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman simply said, "Israel is trying to raise the low morale of IDF soldiers." In Beirut this morning, Marwan Khamda, Lebanese minister, said the Lebanese army is on top alert because Israel may try and take advantage of the exercise to launch an attack. He said that the Israeli army wants to recoup the losses it suffered in the Second Lebanon War. These were not the only reactions to the exercise. The head of the northern border communities, Shlomo Buchbut, complained that the exercise completely bypassed the frontline villages because the entire area, he said, is not at all ready for war. He said he wrote a harsh letter to Defense Minister Ehud Barak, calling on him to cancel the exercise in the north. Buchbut claimed that the bomb shelters in the area have not been refurbished by the IDF or prepared in any way. In response, the head of the civilian sector in the IDF Home Command, Colonel Chilik Sofer, said, "Each community is responsible for its own shelters." The IDF Home Command, he said, only defines the criteria. He pointed out that the exercise is intended to check all aspects of the rear command in times of emergency, including the state of the shelters and the performance of the local councils. Tomorrow the exercise will be conducted in schools. Sirens will be sounded throughout the country, except in the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
And remember, those sirens will be sounded at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Prime Minister Olmert met in Jerusalem for 3 hours this afternoon with PA President Mahmoud Abbas. It was the first time the two met since the deadly terror attack at the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva in the capital a month ago. 2 hours of today's talks included the full negotiating teams, followed by private one-on-one discussions between the leaders. According to senior sources in the Prime Minister's office, both men reiterated their commitment to reaching a historic agreement by the end of the year. Both sides raised concerns about the implementation of the roadmap by the other, but according to the source, they stressed that despite these concerns, the political dialogue will continue.
The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange labor dispute escalated today when workers shut down the computer systems. Management responded by ordering the Borsa closed for the whole day. That prompted Histadrut labor boss Ofer Eini to intervene. He succeeded in getting both sides to agree to begin trading at 1 o'clock this afternoon and to hold negotiations later this evening. The employees' union is demanding a 15% pay hike, as well as a workers' bonus equivalent to 7 monthly salaries. In addition, they want 80 outside workers included in the collective agreement. To drive home the point, the union has been closing the Tel Aviv Exchange 3 hours early for the past 2 weeks. Management called the demands unreasonable.
Prime Minister Olmert met this morning with Finance Minister Baran to discuss cuts in this year's state budget. Just before the meeting, Baran told Army Radio that there are serious differences between the Treasury and the Prime Minister's office on where to make the cuts. The Prime Minister's office wants to give more money to defence and education at the expense of the other ministries, but the Treasury is seeking an across-the-board cut. No decisions were made at today's meeting, and Olmert and Baran are set to meet again after the Passover holiday. Meanwhile, ties between Israel and Turkey are thriving, this according to Murad Merjan, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Turkish Parliament. Merjan met this morning with Knesset Speaker Dalia Itzik in the Knesset in Jerusalem and extended a personal invitation from the Speaker of the Turkish Parliament to meet in Ankara.
I am very delighted to be here. The relationship between Turkey and Israel is excellent. We have political, cultural, economic relations, and we have been strategic allies in the region. Our cooperation is excellent, but it has to improve even further. We know the importance of this country, and also I'm sure that Israeli government and the politicians are aware of the importance of Turkey.
With the Passover holiday less than 2 weeks away, many are concerned whether those living with limited means will have enough food for their family seders or holiday meals. IBA's Aaron Viner brings us this report on several efforts to draw attention to their plight.
The first plague is government cutbacks on public services. The second plague is cutting allowances. Those were the opening words at yesterday's mock Passover Seder at Ben-Gurion University, where sociology students hope to bring attention to the plight of the poor. Plates were symbolically filled with sand. Student Sophie Zarchin invited the public to read from the specially prepared Haggadah at the event, staged in the poorest of Beersheva's neighborhoods. Dr. Roni Kaufman of the School of Social Work says that even though some 2 million Israelis currently live in poverty, the situation isn't irreversible. Food drives are now underway, hoping to raise funds for some 1,200 food baskets containing up to 300 shekels of basic staples for holiday meals. Volunteers say that this is a particularly difficult task this year due to the recent fall of the dollar. The Lend a Hand Foundation is providing poor families with refrigerators for only 40 shekels and washing machines for 30. Still, many question why the nation's impoverished must depend on the goodwill of private citizens and charitable groups rather than the government. This is Aaron Viner for IBA News.
Back now to security and diplomatic affairs, and joining us in the studio is Middle East expert Dr. Jonathan Spire of the Gloria Center in Herzliya. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Spire, for being our guest this evening. Well, we heard that both Olmert and Abbas have reiterated that they do indeed, against all odds, intend to reach an agreement by the end of this year. Is this at all possible in your view?
We are told that the working teams are meeting on a regular basis, they're meeting on a bi-weekly basis. They are apparently discussing, they claim to be discussing core issues. It's important to remember, however, that we're talking here about what's called a shelf agreement. In other words, this is an agreement which it is known in advance is not going to be implemented. Rather, it's going to be apparently, allegedly agreed between the sides, then placed upon the shelf for better days to come, so to speak. And I think everybody really acknowledges, for as long as you have a division in the Palestinian national movement, and for as long as you have the Gaza Strip under the control of Hamas, then actually implementing an agreement, whether or not it's agreed on paper, it remains an impossibility, an implausibility, and therefore the characterization of the current negotiations as virtual is not entirely inaccurate.
A security official told the cabinet yesterday that Hamas is rearming and they're preparing for another round of conflict with the IDF. Is that an inevitable next step as you see it?
I think it's generally conceded by everybody that this is a matter of time. Yuval Diskin of the Shin Bet, who you mentioned, the security official you mentioned, said a couple of other interesting things too. Firstly, that our cooperation with Egypt is improving in attempting to stop smuggling of weapons by Hamas, but undoubtedly a lot is still getting through. He also said, and again I think this is generally accepted, that no ceasefire with Hamas will hold, primarily because Hamas will not commit to stopping attacks by other organizations, and this is an unfeasible situation. If Hamas says, we agree not to throw anything at you, we're not going to stop Islamic Jihad from doing so, that of course cannot be something which Israel will agree to. Since there's no basis for agreement, it becomes a near inevitability that conflict will eventually return, yes.
Jonathan, let's talk about the north, where our government has been issuing conciliatory messages to Syria, but we understand that there is nervousness in Syria, both about the current drill that's going on in the country and so on. Do they have reason to be nervous in Syria?
Israel has been very keen to reiterate to the Syrians in the last days, of course, a soothing message, namely that the current exercise has nothing to do with any aggressive intentions whatsoever. But the exercise has to be placed into a broader context of ongoing tension on the borders between Israel and Syria, which has been going on in a sense since the end of the Second Lebanon War, but certainly since the operation in September 2007 against a Syrian installation in the north of their country, and certainly since the killing of him at Mourdock in February. So tension is at its height in any case. The Syrians look at what happened in the last days, not only the exercise, but also Defense Minister Ehud Barak's decision to cancel his visit to Germany, also his visit to the northern border and his statement that it was not worthwhile for Syria to think about attacking Israel. They put all that together and they feel they have reason to worry. Regarding the exercise itself, clearly there's nothing to worry about. Regarding aggressive intentions on the part of Israel, clearly there's nothing to worry about. But there is ongoing tension in the north, and there is a scenario in which if Hezbollah were to choose to the coming days or weeks to retaliate for the killing of Mourdock, there is the possibility of an escalation towards conflict in the north. So in that sense, there is reason for all of us to be concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Israel has reportedly agreed to a U.S. request to divulge details of an attack on a Syrian nuclear facility last September. Is this a wise course of action to take at this moment? Because it could happen this month, those details being released. Or do we run the risk of pushing Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, against the wall where he has no choice but to save face and take some sort of action?
This is clearly the Israeli concern, Yochanan. As you'll be aware, the defense establishment here in Israel were very much opposed to this move. It appears that Israel is not able to dictate whatever it wants to happen. It certainly can't dictate to the U.S. This is apparently part of a larger U.S. intention of attempting to bring the North Koreans away from their involvement with Iran, with radical regimes in the region. So I think Israel doesn't really have much to say with regard to this. The Israelis would prefer the meeting in Congress to be held not open to the public coverage. That, I think, is what Israel will be trying to push for. Israel can't really dictate on these matters. There is a sense of concern about pushing Bashar to the wall. It's a very complex game Israel has to play. Israel wants to rebuild its deterrence with regard to the Syrians, but not place them in a humiliating position where they feel they have no choice but to do something. And yes, this is a very careful tightrope that Israel has to walk.
Well, we'll definitely be following that story. Dr. Jonathan Spire, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Well, back to local news and to the appalling case of child abuse that has shocked the entire country. Rabbi Eli Cohen, the spiritual leader behind a fringe sect accused of systematically abusing children from a Jerusalem family, has fled to Canada. The mother of the family, who is suspected of participating in the abuse, remains in custody. Jerusalem police and the state prosecutor are considering issuing a warrant for the rabbi's extradition. Two of the family's 8 children, aged 4 and 5, were hospitalized in serious and critical condition 2 weeks ago after Cohen allegedly ordered 2 of his followers to beat and burn them to so-called correct the children's behavior. The mother is even accused of locking them in a suitcase for several days. During a search of Cohen's home, police found journals documenting the violence. The 4-year-old is still hospitalized with severe brain damage. Cohen and 3 of his supporters began, quote, coaching the family with their abusive philosophy several months ago. The rabbi supposedly chose Canada as his refuge because extradition laws in that country are very strict.
Well, happier news regarding Israeli families now, and a groundbreaking ruling from a Tel Aviv court will allow working women to deduct part of the cost of childcare from their income tax payments. The decision will apply to both employees and self-employed and may pave the way for thousands of mothers to join the workforce. The decision was handed down by Tel Aviv District Court Judge Magen Altuvia. The tax authorities say they will appeal the ruling on the grounds that childcare is not a business expense but a private one. They also argue that mothers are already compensated by way of child allowances from the National Insurance Institute and are given tax credit points for each child, and therefore they don't merit child care deductions. If implemented, the law would cost the state some 2 billion shekels a year. And joining us now in our Tel Aviv studio to discuss the landmark ruling is Ester Levanon Mourdock, Vice President of the Israel Women's Network. Ester, thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, too.
A great day for Israeli women?
Yes, absolutely. The IWN actually congratulates the court for a very courageous and breakthrough ruling in this issue. We realize, of course, as we've heard in some of the interviews and read in the articles, that this ruling does not encompass all women who we want to encourage to join the workforce, because it includes only the women who reach the tax threshold. And we would like to believe that this is the beginning of realizing that the way to encourage women to join the workforce is by sort of recognizing the fact that has been recognized in several countries abroad already, that taking care of children, which is a family issue, not only women's issue, is part of the encouragement that women are entitled to, as seeing these expenditure as part of the tax-deductible expenses that are realized for any other businesses.
Esther, let me ask you this question. The Finance Ministry is already saying it's going to appeal this ruling, and they claim that women already get child allowances and tax credits for their children, so that they're not entitled to these new deductions. What do you say to that argument?
First of all, the entitlement, the point of entitlement is something like, I don't know, 130, 140 pounds. Of course, it's sort of ridiculous to consider this as a sort of an encouragement for women to go out to work. I think we shouldn't mix the issues that are at hand here. Because when we talk about recognizing the expenditure on childcare as part of tax-deductible expenses for enabling women to join the workforce, we are talking about something that has been a sort of entitlement for many, many men who go out to work or open offices or put any kind of expenditure on their tax deduction bill. And I think that something that has been going on for many, many years. The IWN has been dealing with this issue for like 2 decades already, and only recently, I can say even tomorrow, there has been legislation which has been rejected, unfortunately, by the Knesset, that has put this into effect, the fact that we can join many women into this agenda of encouraging women to join the workforce, either by those who meet the threshold of tax deduction, or the women who do not reach the tax threshold, by giving them some sort of a grant.
Esther,
and I think that this is the way to look at it,
Esther,
as something that has been given to many, many men who go out to work and put a lot of expenditure on their tax-deductible bill.
Esther, just how many women are we talking about who might be encouraged to go into the workforce?
We are talking about any number of women, since this is the interest of the state. It has been the interest of the state to make women part of the workforce of the country. It's for the benefit of society. It's for the benefit of the economy. And I think that the reaction of the tax authorities sort of reminds us of many sort of reactions that have been sort of a backlash whenever women join another frontier of bettering their situation and enabling them to be part of the workforce.
Ester, Levanon, Mourdock, thank you so much for being our guest this evening.
Thank you too.
And we return now to the efforts to provide food to the poor over the holiday season. We're joined by Eran Weintraub, director of the Latet Relief Organization. Thank you very much, Eran, for being our guest.
Good evening.
Eran, how many people are we talking about? If you know the overall figures, how many people in Israel will be hungry over this Passover holiday?
There are about 1.7 million people who live under the poverty line in Israel, and about a million people, 200,000 families, that suffer from food insecurity, and literally they're hungry.
What's become of the welfare ministry plans that were adopted about a year ago to step up government involvement?
First of all, everybody must remember that the people who are hungry every day of the year, they suffer from the food insecurity every day. Before holidays, everybody feel that they want to help them have a Seder meal. About what you said, we appealed to the Supreme Court 1 year ago. After that, the Minister of Welfare nominated a committee. They just came out with their report a week ago. We are not happy with everything they say over there, but we think that this is the first step to force the government to take responsibility, first of all, about taking care of poverty, dealing with the food insecurity problem in Israel, we must remember that Israel is the poorest country in the Western world.
And do the volunteer organizations have enough money, enough food to feed the hungry this Passover? Even though, of course, it's not their job, but you're doing it.
You're right. It's not our job. We think it's, as I said, it's the government responsibility. We make, a lot of efforts. We are fortunate to have more than 5,000 volunteers who work every day, and we cooperate together. We are an umbrella organization in Latet that work out with more than 100 local agencies that work in over 80 settlements in Israel. I am afraid that it's not enough to feed all the needy people, but that it's a Jew thing and it's also Israeli thing to give. And we hope that the Israelis and also Jews, also in Israel and abroad, will make an effort together so we can help as much as people as we can to have a Seder meal.
I'm glad you mentioned the people living abroad, because we have a large international audience. Those living overseas, outside of Israel, what can they do to help?
First of all, I think that support, they can send a message that they support us. I think that this is the message that everybody needs. It gives us motivation and so on. After that, I think that everybody can donate how much he can. We have our website, www.latet.org.il. They also can phone us to 1-750-40-33. Of course, people who are coming to Israel in this holiday time can also call us and volunteer. We will be very happy to enable them to do that.
All right. Aaron Weintraub, we congratulate you on the wonderful work you're doing. Director of the Latet Relief Organization. Thanks.
Thank you.
Stock Talk now. Share prices on the Tel Aviv Exchange edged higher on a trading day shortened by a workers' dispute, and the shekel was lower in foreign currency trading. Let's take a look at the late afternoon numbers.
And our IBA team is calling for pleasant spring weather with partly cloudy skies, no real change in temperatures. Here are the highs and lows.
That's all the time we have for today. Back tomorrow at this same time on this same channel.
And until then, thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom. Let's take a look at today's main news stories in the light of the eternal book of books, the Bible. The prophet Jeremiah declared, "Peace, peace, and there is no peace." Then he goes on to say in chapter 6, verse 11, to give the reasons why there is no peace. They, the world powers and Israeli leaders, have tried to heal the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, it says. Let's analyze these two words, hurt and slightly, to see if we can glean the reasons why there is no peace in Israel today, or in the rest of the world for that matter. The word hurt means a crushing, and certainly the innocent people, both Jews and Palestinians, always seem to get squashed under the weight of repeated yet empty promises of peace by the power brokers, led mainly by the United States. We heard today that Prime Minister Olmert and President Abbas are mobilizing their full negotiating teams from the Israeli and Palestinian sides, and that they are promising a breakthrough by the end of this year. Why is this going to happen, or is this just more rhetoric with very little substance behind it? I believe that the second word we want to discuss holds the key to our understanding. It says, they try to heal the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly. Now in Hebrew the word slightly is kalal, meaning a superficial or light manner that does not get to the bottom of the matter or to the root of the actual causes of this lack of peace. I think that the real reason why the basic issues are not dealt with in the peace process is because both sides are coming from different points of view and objectives. The Israeli left keeps thinking that if they just go on giving up more land, then one day it will be enough and some kind of a magical way Israel will have peace. The fundamentalist Muslims' position, on the other hand, is that Israel cannot exist at all in the Middle East. They want Israel to disappear completely. Now, this is an erroneous basis for peace negotiation that have been repeated over and over again over these last nearly 100 years. To illustrate this clearly, one day when speaking on the Near East conflict, an idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. Suddenly, I saw why there is no peace. It's because you have two teams playing a deadly peace game on the same field, but both are playing different games. You have the Jews, who, even if they don't realize it, are playing with their own rule book, the Bible. The promises of God to Abraham are eternal and everlasting, giving the land of promise to the Jews. This is a forever covenant found in the Bible that states that God Himself is watching over it. He will not allow the Jews not to just give the land away. Then the Palestinians are playing this deadly peace game governed by a different rule book, the Quran, which says kill or eliminate the infidels wherever you find them. Now, over these last 80 years, the Palestinian Arabs could have had a state 7 different times, yet they never achieved it once. Why? Because they want it all. And in this way, they're actually fighting against the Almighty, the Holy One of Israel. It will never work. It's doomed to fail from the beginning. Now, I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but real peace will only come when the real issues are addressed, not imaginary ones. Now, another news story concerns the rising level of poverty in Israel. Aaron Weintraub says, surprisingly, that out of Israel's 6 million Jews, 1.7 million are living today under the poverty line. They suffer what he calls food insecurity, meaning that they are anxious to know where their next meal will literally come from. Israel is now considered one of the poorest countries in the Western world, and this is in spite of the fact that in 2007 the Israeli economy grew by a rate of 5.7%, far outstripping the international average of 2.7%. Even this year, the Bank of Israel expects the economy to grow by 4.4%. But it is, as they say, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And how tragic that is. And yes, the best minds in Israel today are working to reverse this trend through such plans as social privatization and transferring of stock ownership of government-controlled companies directly to ordinary citizens. But will it work? This sounds great, but it's very difficult to achieve. Remember the case of privatization in post-Soviet Union Russia, where it didn't really work as intended due to graft and corruption. As usual, human nature got in the way. But did you know that the Bible has already given us a solution? It's called the Jubilee year, when once every 50th year, all debts are forgiven and all inequalities in the economy are rectified. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It means that once every generation, the playing field is leveled to prevent inequality between the rich and the poor. Do you know that Israel bequeathed this amazing truth to the world, yet it lies dormant between the unturned pages of the Bible awaiting the Messiah? Yes, even the United States, the great economy, leading economy in the world, needs this vital message as its economy continues to lead the world's developed nations in the gap of inequality between the haves and the have-nots. Here's what the Bible says, "And you shall consider the 50th year, and proclaim liberty through all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee year for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you to his own family." Now, the word liberty here means freedom and release to all slaves and restoration of lost property every 50 years. In his first sermon, Jesus quoted from Isaiah 61, which states that the Messiah's anointing and divine commission enables him to proclaim liberty to the captives or the slaves. Finally, we end today's news stories with a very tragic tale indeed. It involves the abuse of children, where a so-called rabbi was found guilty for the severe beating of his 4- and 5-year-olds, so badly that one of them has suffered brain damage. The mother had locked the children in a suitcase to discipline them. The father has since fled to Canada because it's difficult to be extradited from Canada. Now, these kinds of human beings must be brought to justice and prevented from further destructive acts against little ones. This epidemic of child abuse in Israel and around the world is shocking. My wife Meridel regularly addresses this issue in her Healing for the Family seminars around the world. Also, David Rawlings, my son, has filmed a seminar here in Israel and produced a powerful DVD on the abuse of women called I Am My Sister's Keeper. We have these tools available for you so that now you too can make a difference in your neighborhood. Statistics show that 1 in 3 kids are abused globally. This is perhaps the worst epidemic of all, but you can change things. Order your copy of Meridel's book, Honor Thy Father, a book exposing incest in a religious home. Meridel wrote the book to tell the story of her friend Judy. And the best way to combat this disease is to expose the sickness at its source or root and to break the secrets and to speak out. You can do that. Please do contact Meridel at stillsmallvoice.tv. And remember, Jesus said, if you offend one of these little ones, it's better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and to be thrown into the midst of the sea. Now, here today are suggestions for prayer points. Please never underestimate the power of prayer. Number 1, why don't you pause for a moment and ask the Almighty what He thinks about this current peace process. Pray for truth to prevail. Number 2, pray for the poor in Israel. It's a shame to this nation. Ask God to put it in the hearts of our leaders to be charitable. For it's the citizens who are caring for the poor by their giving. And 3, pray for the suffering little ones. Pray for Israel to become competent in working with this horrific disease. And pray that the abusers be brought to justice. Now we leave you today with this promise from the Word of God. For the Lord your God is God of all gods and Lord of lords, and a great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality. He administers justice for the fatherless and the widow, and He loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing. Therefore love the stranger, for you too were strangers in the land of Egypt.